Rain drummed softly against the hospital windows at night, a rhythmic whisper that filled the silence of room 309. Inside, Nurse Alara Mendez adjusted the foredrip of a man who hadn't opened his eyes in 4 months. His name was listed as John Doe. No family, no visitors, and no history anyone could trace. But there was something about him that pulled her in. The faint scar along his jaw, the quiet nobility in his stillness, the way his hand seemed to twitch when she read aloud beside him. Alara was known for her patience. Every night after her shift, she'd stay back just a little longer, telling John stories about her late mother, her dreams of becoming a doctor, and the tiny apartment she struggled to pay for. She never expected a response. But sometimes, when she spoke about kindness or hope, the monitor beside him would beep a little faster, as though his heart were listening. What Alara didn't know was that the man lying motionless in that bed was Alexander Grant, a billionaire tech mogul who disappeared after a mysterious car crash on the outskirts of the city. The media had long assumed he'd fled the country. His own board had declared him dead to seize control of his empire. But here he was, forgotten, broken, and being cared for by a woman who treated him not as a patient, but as a person. One evening, Alara came in late. Her eyes were swollen. She'd just received an eviction notice. She forced a smile as she entered his room, clutching a book in her trembling hands. "Don't worry, John," she said softly, settling beside him. "You've had a rough time, but I think I'm catching up to you." Her laugh was brittle, but it filled the room with warmth. Outside, a storm was brewing. The power flickered, and for a brief second, darkness swallowed everything. When the lights came back, something shifted. His fingers twitched. Alara froze. "Did you?" she whispered, stepping closer. "John." No answer, just the rhythmic hum of the machines. She shook her head, telling herself it was her imagination. But the next morning when she returned, his eyes were open, deep glassy blue, scanning the ceiling like someone rediscovering light for the first time. Alara gasped, nearly dropping her clipboard. "You're awake!" she cried, rushing to his side. He turned his head slowly, his lips barely moving. "Where am I?" Her eyes filled with tears. "St. Mercy's Hospital. You've been in a coma for months. But you're safe now. I've been taking care of you." His voice cracked, raw from disuse. "You stayed?" She nodded. "Every day." He looked at her for a long time, something unreadable flickering behind those tired eyes. Gratitude? Recognition? She couldn't tell. The doctors were astonished. They said his recovery bordered on miraculous. Within days, the hospital was buzzing with rumors. The John Doe patient had woken up, and his tests showed perfect cognitive recovery. But no one could guess his true identity. Alexander Grant's face had been absent from the world for so long that even those who'd once worked for him might not recognize the gaunt version that now sat quietly by the window, watching the rain. Alara never pried. To her, he was just John, a man who had lost everything and was learning to live again. She brought him soup, told him jokes, even helped him learn to walk again down the sterile white corridors. Their bond grew fragile, unspoken, but real. She noticed how his eyes softened when she smiled, how his hands trembled when he tried to thank her. But something strange began to happen. The hospital administrator, Mr. Kellen, suddenly became unusually attentive to mysterious patient. Men in suits started appearing at odd hours. One evening, Alara overheard a conversation in the hallway. "Sir, if that's truly Alexander Grant in there, this could change everything. The board thinks he's dead." Her breath caught. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Asterisk Alexander Grant? The missing billionaire? Asterisk she peeked to the blinds of his room and saw him sitting there, staring blankly at the city lights, his expression distant, haunted. The next morning, when she entered with his breakfast, she tried to sound casual. "So John, or should I say Alexander?" He froze. The spoon in his hand clattered to the tray. For a moment, his face drained of color. Then he sighed, his voice low. "You heard?" Alara swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," he said quietly, "you were the first person who looked at me and didn't see a name. You saw me." Her chest tightened. "And now that I know—" He smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. Now, I suppose he'll disappear too, like everyone else. But she didn't. Instead, she sat beside him and said softly, "I've taken care of you when you couldn't breathe on your own, Mr. Grant. Do you really think your money scares me now?" Something in him broke at that, a wall he'd kept even in silence. He reached for her hand, his voice trembling. "You saved my life, Ilara, and I don't just mean the medical part." She wanted to speak, but her throat closed. For the first time, she saw the man behind the headlines, lonely, broken, desperate for something real. Days turned into weeks. His strength returned, and with it came a flood of consequences. Reporters camped outside. Lawyers, shareholders, and investigators all demanded answers. But Ilara's world began to collapse quietly behind the chaos. She was suspended, accused of breaching confidentiality for discovering his identity. When she left the hospital that day, her badge confiscated, the sky wept above her. She walked home in silence, clutching her old umbrella, unaware that a black car had pulled up behind her at the corner. The black car idled for a moment before the tinted window rolled down, revealing a familiar face. Ilara froze, her heart thudding as Alexander Grant stepped out, dressed in a simple gray coat, his hair still slightly unkempt but his eyes sharp and alive again. Rain blurred the lines between them, his breath visible in the cold air. "Ilara," he said softly, almost unsure she would turn. She didn't at first. Her hands trembled around the umbrella handle. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured, her voice trembling. "There are reporters everywhere. If they see you—" "I don't care," he interrupted gently, stepping closer. "They've already taken everything from me once. I'm not letting them take the one person who made me want to live again." The words hit her like thunder. She turned slowly, her eyes wide. His gaze held hers, steady, pleading. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They suspended me. I'm under investigation. Because of you. My job, my career, it's all I had." "I know," he said, voice low and heavy with guilt. "And I'll fix it. I promise you, Ilara, I'll make this right." She gave a faint, tired laugh. "You can't fix everything with money, Mr. Grant." He flinched slightly at the name. "Alexander," he corrected gently. "Just Alexander, please." The way he said it, quiet, stripped of power, softened her anger just enough for her to look up at him fully. Rainwater ran down his face, mixing with something else that glistened near his lashes. He looked human now, not like the billionaire from the newspapers, but like a man trying to find a reason to be forgiven. "I never wanted you to pay for helping me," he said finally. "I just didn't know who to trust. Everyone around me wanted something. You were the only one who never asked for anything back." "I asked for my patients to get better," she said quietly. "That's all I ever wanted." "And I did," he said, taking a hesitant step closer. "Because of you." She hesitated. Her throat ached with 100 unspoken emotions, relief, confusion, affection, and fear. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, extending it toward her. "What's this?" she asked. "Your reinstatement letter," he said, "signed and approved, and a transfer request." She frowned. "Transfer? To where?" "To the Grant Foundation's private clinic," he said softly. "We're opening a new division for patients without families, people who can't afford long-term care. I want you to lead it." Her lips parted, stunned. You can't be serious." "I am," he said. "I've seen what real compassion looks like. Ilara, it doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from people like you." For a moment, the street disappeared. The cars, the rain, the noise, everything faded until it was only him, standing before her, offering not pity but purpose. "I can't accept this," she murmured. "It's too much." "Then accept it for them," he said quietly. "For the people you always stayed late to help. For the ones no one else remembers." She stared down at the letter, her pulse racing. A tear slid down her cheek. She wasn't sure if it was from gratitude or exhaustion. When she looked up again, he was watching her with a tenderness she hadn't seen before. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But let me at least drive you home. You shouldn't be walking in the rain." Against her better judgment, she nodded, The car's interior was warm and quiet, the soft hum of the engine filling the silence between them. For a while, neither spoke. Ilara sat staring out the window, her thoughts tangled. The city lights flickered against her reflection, a woman who had spent her life saving others, now being offered something that felt dangerously close to a miracle. Alexander broke the silence first. "You live alone?" She nodded. "Since my mother passed." He looked down at his hands. "I lost my mother when I was young. She was a nurse, too." Ilara turned to him, surprised. "Really? She used to tell me that people remember kindness longer than success," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I built an empire trying to prove her wrong. But in the end..." His voice trailed off, and he looked at her, eyes soft. "You proved her right." She didn't know what to say. The air in the car felt heavier now, charged with something unspoken, something fragile. When they reached her apartment building, she turned to thank him, but he was already opening her door for her, holding an umbrella above her head. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." "No," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Ilara." He hesitated for a moment, as though wanted to say more, then simply added, "I'll call you tomorrow. Please think about the offer." She nodded, clutching the envelope against her chest as she watched the car disappear down the wet street. That night, she sat by her window, staring at the city below. The rain had stopped, but her mind was restless. She reread the letter a dozen times, his signature, bold and deliberate at the bottom. It didn't feel real, and yet something deep inside her whispered that this was only the beginning. The next morning, she woke to a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found a small box on the floor with no note, just her name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a phone and a message displayed on the screen. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means you're ready. The car will be downstairs at 9 a.m. Asterisk, her pulse quickened. She glanced at the clock. 8:47. She hesitated, pacing back and forth. Was she really ready for this? To step into a world of billionaires and power, a world that had already cost her peace once before? But then she thought of the patients she'd lost, the ones who'd needed more than the system could offer. Maybe this was her chance to make a difference on a scale she never could before. At exactly 9 o'clock, she found herself standing outside as a sleek black car pulled up again. The driver smiled politely. "Miss Mendez, Mr. Grant is expecting you." Her heart skipped. She climbed in, unsure what waited ahead. The car wound through the city and out toward the hills, where glass towers rose against the sky, the headquarters of Grant Innovations. She'd seen it in news articles before, but standing before it now felt unreal. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble and gold, but it wasn't the luxury that caught her eye. It was a mural on the far wall. It showed a nurse holding a patient's hand beneath a glowing heart. Below it, engraved in silver, were the words, asterisk, "Kindness is the only wealth that multiplies when shared." Asterisk, her breath caught. She turned, and there he was, standing behind her, watching her reaction with a quiet smile. "You did this?" she asked. He nodded. "For you, for what you reminded me of." Her eyes softened. "You really think I can run a whole division?" "I know you can," he said simply. "You already ran my life back to me." Something in his tone, that rare, raw honesty, sent warmth spreading through her chest. She wanted to protest again, but before she could, a voice interrupted from behind. "Mr. Grant, the board is waiting for you in the conference room." Alexander's expression darkened slightly, the businessman slipping back into his eyes. "Tell him I'll be there in a moment," he said. When the assistant left, he turned back to Ilara. "There are people who won't be happy that I'm alive," he admitted. "They've taken control of parts of the company. They'll try to use you against me if they find out how close we become." She frowned. "Close? We barely know each other." His lips curved faintly. "Don't we?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Something in his gaze held her still, a storm of emotion, regret, gratitude, and something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name. "Just promise me you'll be careful," he said finally. "If anything happens, Call the number saved on that phone. Alexander, she said softly. What are you not telling me? He hesitated. Then his jaw tightened. There are things from my past I thought were buried, but they're waking up again. And now they know about you. Her stomach turned cold. What do you mean, they? He looked past her, toward the glass doors leading out to the city below, where dark clouds were gathering again. The people who tried to kill me, he said quietly. They know I survived. Ilara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. His words echoed through the glass room like a slow-moving storm. They know I survived. The air around them thickened, not with fear, but with realization. Everything suddenly made sense. The untraceable hospital file, the mysterious suits, the hushed conversations in the hallways. Alexander hadn't just been in a car accident. Someone had wanted him gone. Her voice trembled. You mean the crash? It wasn't an accident, he said, his tone sharp, final. It was orchestrated. And now that I'm awake, they'll come to finish what they started. Ilara's heart pounded, but there was something fierce in her eyes, the kind of fire that comes from surviving too much to back down. Then we fight, she said quietly. He looked at her, surprised. You don't understand what that means. These people, they're powerful, ruthless. She stepped closer, cutting him off. So, are you? And you're not alone this time. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the rain beginning to drum harder against the tall glass windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a warning. That night, Alexander moved Ilara into his private estate, a fortress of modern design perched atop the hills, overlooking the city. Security tightened, and every entrance was guarded. But danger has a way of seeping through cracks, especially when the enemy knows where to strike. As the days passed, Ilara threw herself into work at the Foundation Clinic. The ward she designed for abandoned patients became the heart of the building, clean, calm, filled with warmth. The press began to talk about the nurse who healed a billionaire, but she avoided interviews. She didn't care for fame. She only cared that her patients smiled again, that she could bring light into places forgotten by the world. Alexander watched her often, quietly, from his office window. For a man who once lived surrounded by ambition, it felt strange to find peace in silence. But it was peace laced with tension, because every phone call, every meeting could be a trap. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, he entered the clinic unannounced. Ilara was sitting beside a young boy recovering from surgery, telling him stories of courage and hope. Her voice was soft, her presence grounding. Alexander stood at the doorway, listening. When she finally noticed him, she smiled gently. You shouldn't be out here without your guards. I needed to see this, he said, his eyes never leaving hers, to remind myself why I came back. Ilara tilted her head. You came back because of justice, didn't you? To reclaim what they stole. He shook his head slowly. I came back because of you. The words landed between them like a confession long overdue. She froze, her breath catching. His gaze didn't waver. It was steady, certain, stripped of all the walls that once made him untouchable. Before she could respond, the clinic lights flickered, once, twice, then went dark. The generator kicked in after a heartbeat, but the unease lingered. Alexander's expression shifted immediately. He turned to his bodyguard, locked down the building. No one in or out. Moments later, chaos erupted. The security feed showed 3 masked men breaching the rear entrance. They were fast, coordinated, professionals. Get her to safety, Alexander ordered. Ilara grabbed his arm. No, I'm not leaving you. This isn't up for debate. I've seen too many people left behind on operating tables, she shot back. If you think I'm running now, you don't know me at all. For a second, something fierce and proud flickered in his eyes. Then he nodded reluctantly. Stay behind me. They moved through the silent hallways, the echoes of footsteps in the distance. Alarms blared faintly, red lights painting everything in flashes. Ilara's pulse hammered in her ears as they ducked behind a corridor. She could see one of the men advancing toward the ICU. Alexander motioned her to stay low. But as he stepped forward, something in her snapped. She couldn't just hide. She grabbed a tray of metal instruments and threw it across the hall. The The sound clattered through the corridor, drawing the attacker's attention. Alexander seized a moment, lunging at the man. The struggle was short but brutal. When it ended, the masked intruder lay unconscious, and Alexander's lip was bleeding. "Nice aim," he said, breathless, wiping the blood away. She smirked faintly. "You're welcome." They moved quickly to the main entrance, where the other two men had cornered the guards. Within minutes, police sirens pierced the night, and the attackers fled into the dark, leaving chaos in their wake. After it was over, the clinic was a wreck. Broken glass, overturned furniture, but no lives lost. As the officers took statements, Ilera sat on the steps outside, trembling from the adrenaline. Alexander approached her quietly. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said, his voice low. She looked up, eyes bright with emotion. "And let them kill you? I don't think so." He crouched beside her, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You keep saving me," he murmured, "even when I don't deserve it." "You saved me, too," she said softly. "You gave me a purpose again." That night marked a turning point. The attack confirmed Alexander's worst fears. His enemies weren't finished. But it also solidified something deeper between them, a bond that no wealth or power could manufacture. Weeks passed, and investigations led to shocking revelations. The people behind the attack were senior members of Alexander's own board. They had conspired to eliminate him, forge his death, and sell off pieces of his empire to foreign investors. With evidence gathered and the truth revealed, Alexander publicly exposed them. The media erupted, and the world watched as he reclaimed his company with Ilera standing silently at his side. She didn't crave the spotlight, but her presence beside him became a symbol of integrity. A nurse who healed not only a man but the soul of a corrupted empire. In the aftermath, Alexander restructured everything. He dissolved half his corporate assets and diverted the funds into global health initiatives under Ilera's leadership. "If money once built walls," he said at the launch event, "it's time it built bridges instead." As applause filled the hall, his eyes found hers across the crowd, and in that instant, the noise faded. There was no billionaire, no nurse, no power or fame, just two people who had found light in each other's darkness. But peace, as always, never stayed long. Months later, on an ordinary morning, Ilera woke to find a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, sharp, deliberate. "You think the war is over, Miss Mendez, but you only cured the surface. The disease still breathes beneath." Her stomach turned. She ran to Alexander's estate, only to find his guards in chaos. The gates were open. His car was missing. "Where is he?" she shouted. When the guard stammered, We don't know, ma'am." He left without the convoy. Said he needed to clear his head. Fear clawed at her chest. She jumped into her car and drove through the twisting roads leading out of the city. Called his phone again and again. No answer. Rain began to pour, blurring the road ahead, memories flashing in the night. She first found him comatose. When she reached the cliff road where his previous crash had happened, she saw it, his car, parked at the edge. Her heart nearly stopped. She stumbled out, calling his name into the storm. Alexander. His figure emerged from the fog, standing near the railing, drenched but calm. Relief flooded through her, until she saw the look in his eyes. "I thought I could escape it," he said, voice hollow. "But power doesn't forgive. Ilera. It waits. It poisons quietly." She grabbed his arm. "Then let's fight it together. Don't do this alone." He turned, the ghost of a smile flickering through the rain. "You already gave me a reason to fight. Now I need to give the world one. Alexander, please." He pressed a small USB drive into her palm. "This has everything. Names, accounts, proof of everything they did. If something happens to me, promise me you'll expose it." Tears blurred her vision. "Nothing's going to happen to you. We'll go to the police. The screech of tires sliced through the storm. A black SUV barreled down the road, headlights cutting through the mist. Alexander pushed her aside just as the vehicle skidded toward them. It slammed into the guardrail, metal shrieking, sparks flying. He stumbled back, gripping her shoulders. "Run," he shouted. "I'm not leaving you." But before she could react, the SUV exploded into flames. the shockwave throwing them both to the ground. The world went white, soundless, and then everything disappeared. When Alara woke, she was in a hospital bed, her body bruised, her mind spinning. The moment she saw the nurse beside her, she panicked. Where's Alexander? The nurse hesitated. The wreckage was severe. They're still searching. Alara tore the floor from her arm. He's alive, she whispered fiercely. He has to be. Days later, search teams found no trace of him. No body, no evidence. Only the charred remains of the SUV and a fragment of his ring. Weeks turned into months, and the world moved on, but Alara didn't. She took the USB he gave her and fulfilled his last request. When she released the data to the authorities, it brought down one of the most powerful criminal networks in the world. His legacy became justice itself. The Grant Foundation expanded globally, building hospitals in forgotten towns, feeding orphans, and funding nurses' education. Every plaque bore the same inscription, in honor of Alexander Grant, who believed kindness outlives power. And sometimes, late at night, Alara would sit by her window, watching the city lights shimmer like memories. The wind would whisper against the glass, almost like a voice she knew by heart. Keep saving them, Alara, it seemed to say. You're my reason still. She'd close her eyes, smile faintly, and whisper back into the night. I never stopped.